Hey guys, Tom Henderson from RESGEN here, and I am so excited that you're joining me for this episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Before we jump into today's show, I want to remind you that we are only weeks away from this year's RESGEN Men's Summit, which is happening on Saturday, February 1st from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. This annual RESGEN event gathers over 1,100 men here in Sioux Falls and hundreds more online and at simulcast sites for a half day that will engage, equip, and encourage you to be a man who is all heart. This year's communicators include Ted Cunningham, Derwin Gray, Brian Laritz, and more. Tickets are only $40 and they will sell out. So jump onto our website, resgen.org, to get you and your friends registered as soon as you can. And while you're there, be sure to check out the info about our couples event, Date Night Comedy, and maybe grab your tickets for that event as well. All right, my guest today has been a friend of mine for over 15 years. Tyler Goff is a follower of Jesus, husband, and a dad who is a realtor and the team leader of the Tyler Goff Group here in Sioux Falls. On today's show, Tyler and I have a meaningful discussion about several different topics, including his heart for helping men find true community, how he has grown in living out his faith in the marketplace, and his passion for giving back to the community and being generous with all that God has given him. We also talk about how a health scare that took place last summer caused him to evaluate his priorities, change some of his perspectives, and helped him make some important adjustments to his life. I'm definitely excited about what this episode has to offer each one of us. Here's my conversation with Tyler Goff. Tyler Goff, brother, it is so fun to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. Honestly, it's gonna be fun.
That's good. I'm glad we're not starting off with lies.
Honestly, this is good.
Well, thank you for your time. I mean, I know this is as we're approaching year end. You know, we're going to drop this episode right in January, but we're all approaching year end, so this is a busy time of year. So I don't take it for granted that you made some margin in your schedule to come and hang out with me at the Giving Life podcast table. So thank you for that. Before we get into I think what's going to be a really meaningful discussion, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself. Several will know who you are, but you know, you're going to be new to some of the RESGEN audience. So introduce yourself, family, kind of what you do, and then we're gonna dive right into some good conversation.
Yeah. So Tyler Goff, from Sioux Falls, most of my life, went to high school here, left for college for a little bit, and shortly after college got right into real estate. So I've been doing residential real estate for 20 years now. Yeah.
Man.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. In the meantime, I'm married, have 4 kids. Our oldest is a freshman at Lincoln.
Oh man, that got serious.
Driving
Thank you.
on our own. Dude, like a new level of stress with that. But it's like a new level of like awesome too.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I don't have to.
You don't have to take her.
Over.
Right. There's the stress of like, did she make it safely? But then also the feeling of celebration that you didn't have to.
I didn't leave my couch. I just sat here and watched the football game. Yeah. No, it's amazing.
Okay. So freshman all the way down to
7th grader, 3rd grader, 1st grader.
Right.
So we got 2 girls, 2 boys.
Thank you for even just. I mean, because you could be taking a nap right now.
We talked about that. You turn the lights off anymore.
It's just out.
Might happen. Yeah, it's it's that busy phase of life for sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and we're going to talk about that and even just how you've been successful or what you've learned as you've even tried to create some margin to make sure that you know, when you have a marriage that you want to care for, you have kids that you want to make sure they're involved in their lives, and you're running a business, you know, how do you make all that work? You know, so we're going to get into all that as well. And then you and Mel have been married for how long?
Oh man, really?
Like
17 years. 2007.
Okay, she told me to ask you that question.
Yeah, good.
She's like, would you please?
Don't ask me our date. No, June 8th, 2007.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so you've been in real estate for 20 years. So you started that while you were in high school, evidently. Because,
exactly.
You're so doggone young,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So you started that right out of college?
Right out of college. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
As an agent working with Heg?
Yep.
Right away?
Not with Heg. Nope. I started at a company called ERA Eastman.
Okay.
Yep. I had a buddy, Rob Kurtenbach,
Oh, yeah.
who was there. And so he kind of
That's
talked me
right.
into coming over there. Was there for like 2 years and then went to HJN Team
Okay.
Real Estate. Was there for, 5 years. And then been at Hague since 2011. Yeah.
And you established the Tyler Goff Group.
Yep.
What year did you do that?
So we were first the Peterson Goff real estate experts, and that was in 2011 that we started that. I was with my business partner, Stacy
yeah.
Peterson, and I bought her out in 2016.
Yeah.
So that's when it became the Tyler Goff Group.
And your team has now grown to
There's 17.
Yeah.
Yep. We got 14 agents, 3 staff. So yeah.
Right.
Constantly growing.
Yeah. Growing. And which I know that means that you're also focusing on how you're growing personally so that you can lead yourself and lead your team as well. So, which is always part of the challenge is how are we going to continue to invest ourselves? And that's part of growing your team and all that. But, well, I want to go back to just where you first, just because I always love hearing faith stories and stories about how God just really gets a hold of people's lives.
Yeah.
And so I want to know a little bit of your faith story. And then when you said, boy, you know what? Faith really, I want my faith to be the foundation of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, kind of a long story, but grew up in a Christian home, grew up going to church, going to Wednesday night, youth and all that. And so kind of grew up in the faith, pretty strict household, I would say. And then when I left for college, that was kind of when I was, I definitely wasn't living out my faith in the high school years, especially kind of the second half of my high school years. And so, but I was still living at home, pretty, under some pretty tight guidelines. So it was really college where I was like, okay, this is it. This is my opportunity just to kind of do things my way.
Yeah.
I went to a college in San Diego called Point Loma. That was where I first started.
Point Loma Nazarene?
Yep.
Oh my gracious, dude. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And kind of just randomly.
How does anybody study there? Because you can't. It's like literally, for those that have never heard of the college, or it is literally on the beach. And
it is so cliff of the ocean. Like my dorm room was 30 yards from the ocean.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody gets a degree.
Yeah. And so that's where I started. Well, that's Nazarene University, like you said. So it's like a very strict Christian school. And so I was there for 1 semester and I'm like, no way, this is not the college experience I'm looking for. So then I left and went to University of Arizona for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Can't get much done there either. That's a hard place to study. I mean, every day it's like 90 and sunny and there's always a pool open. So there was a lot of years in there. I'd say from like my sophomore year in high school to probably my 3rd, 4th year in college, where it was just kind of running away from my faith, just didn't want anything to do with it. While I was at Arizona, I mean, I just kind of ran my life into the ground. I had really, I flunked out of school, kind of ruined most of the relationships that were really close to me. I just wasn't a great dude, pretty selfish motives, and just didn't live a great life. And so it was after that, so I got kicked out of school, moved back home, and really it was kind of one of those moments where it's like, I need to change something. Something needs to change. When I was at Point Loma, when I left, I basically had a conversation with God, and I'm like, leave me alone. I don't want you anywhere in my life. I'm just going to do my own thing. And that's what I did for the next, 3 years or so. And so there was just that time where I kind of hit rock bottom, really. And I'm like, okay, this is not, maybe I don't have it all figured out.
So did you actually, you moved back to Sioux Falls, did you move back home then? Like back into home. So even that was probably just a little bit of a, like, taking off a layer of pride to having to move back.
And it was a summertime, so like a semester had ended, so it was summertime, so
made sense.
Yeah, to like the person that didn't know what was going on, it just kind of looked like a normal summer. But I knew I wasn't going back to Arizona, and and I just knew that something needed to change. So it was after that summer, all my buddies were back and we kind of did our normal summer thing, but it was just and I feel like the Lord was really like working on me that summer, where he was just speaking to me in ways that were kind of inexplainable, and just ways that he was getting my attention and just different things that were happening.
Do you remember like an example of that? Was it through like individuals, or was it more like just like these thoughts that would pop into your brain and you're like, Lord, is that like you talking, or was it?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely some probably individuals in my life at the time, but there was one morning that this is kind of a unique thing, but I had my alarm clock was my radio that was next to my bed. And instead of music, I had it on, like in between radio stations when you actually could like move the dial, and so it would just blare like noise at me. So I'd wake up. Right. And so one morning that came on, and it was like a pastor preaching, and I woke up and I just remember like, what station is this on? And he's ending the sermon, and it was like I might have been dreaming. Maybe this never happened, but no, it did. But he's ending his sermon. He's like, all right, before we leave, push in your chair, because this is the last time you're going to hear this message. He said, and he repeated it. This is the last time that you're going to hear this message. And it was just one of those, it was weird.
Wow.
And to the point to where I woke up and I went to my mom and I'm like, did you like set my radio on like the Christian station or something? She obviously had no clue what I was talking about. That was one instance where there was just, I felt like God was just getting my attention on different things. And there's probably a handful of other things too.
Man, dude, I love that, because one of the things that I just love when I hear people's stories, I mean, you could read the scriptures, obviously, but as you hear people's stories and you find the ways that God pursues the individual in a way that catches them by surprise, or in a way that it's very individualistic, where it's like, really, you're kind of like knowing some things need to change. You're almost like this prodigal son type of thing. Like, I'm coming home after squandering whatever, right? A couple of years pursuing, whatever the world had to offer, but yet still not necessarily saying, I am ready to get right with the Lord, so to speak, but you're trying to figure it out. Like, am I who I want to be? And God has this, preacher on your radio in between the stations and a buzzer and whatever. But oh, it's so good.
Another super random thing. So at the time, my mom had a huge bag of gumballs, and on the wrapper it had scripture. So it was like, I don't know where she got these, but they're like scripture gumballs, right? And and I'd always grab a couple of those when I was leaving the house or whatever. And I'd always pull these gumballs that had the scripture that said, the one where it's like, if you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Which I was always like,
very encouraging.
Yeah. I'm like, this is the most random like scripture to have on that type of thing. Right. But it became like this running joke, because every time I would grab a gum, I'd be like, are you kidding me?
So
like,
not purposeful. That was by
I just reach in, grab it, and then you're like, really? Like, I'm not kidding. Like, every gumball I picked out had that on there.
Yeah.
And like, after I gave my life to the Lord, later that year, she'd buy those gumballs. Never again was that verse on any wrapper.
Wow.
But I mean, it's just stuff like that. Again, where you said it's like unique, kind of feels like a coincidence, or like a personal attack or something, but just unique ways that God can get your attention.
Yeah, and it stops you, it kind of arrests you in your tracks. And so then, okay, so fast forward another couple months towards the end of that year or whatever, and you say, okay, I need to change. I need to receive Christ, and I need to make him a focus of my life. How did that happen?
Yep, I was actually out with some buddies, and rode with one of my buddies, and I just said, "Hey, you run me home." It was early. It was nobody else was leaving, but I'm like, I'm ready to get out of here, and so it was that night where I was just done. I don't know what it was. I just knew like something needed to change. I knew my like first my behaviors needed to change. My whole kind of environment that I was in needed to change. Otherwise, I just knew I was going to amount to nothing. Like I literally was just at a rock bottom place. And it was just at that, I'm like, if something doesn't change, this isn't going to end well.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I knew I needed the Lord, but there's that scripture that says if you bring up your kids in the faith, they'll return to it. And I believe that's just probably answered prayers from my mom and just growing up in that faith where I knew that's what I needed to turn to.
You knew where to come back to.
Yeah.
I mean, and what you maybe at first saw as strict guidelines, and as parents, I think we always, I think that those are always the difficult things, right? And I mean, us both being dads and figuring out, okay, how do we set healthy boundaries?
Yeah.
How do we not lord stuff over them, but I think that as a kid, we always think that any kind of boundary is some sort of chain that has us bound, and we can't, we just can't wait for freedom and all this. But then you realize down the road, like, oh, that really was for our benefit.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, I mean, that's why God gives us guidelines in our lives too, right? I mean, it's not because he just wants to ruin fun or he's a fun hater or whatever. It's because he knows what's best for us and wants us to walk with him. So like in the quietness of your own room kind of thing, you just said, God, I need you, or what?
Yep. Yeah, I did. Well, actually, I went and woke up my mom, and there had just been, I mean, I was living like a lie for a lot of years during that, especially with her. I mean, she thought I was like this perfect kid and that I was just, just had a bad stretch of grades or whatever it was. And so it was kind of one of those moments where it's like, hey, like, if I'm going to make this right, start with the people that are most important to me. Like, I got to come clean on what's really been going on. And then, there was just kind of that, I mean, it was a powerful moment, and then it's like, and then it was like, okay, but I'm ready to like really get serious about life, my faith. I think I had always known like the Lord was important to me because early on, I mean, I had some pretty cool God moments when I was young, and just being around it, growing up around it. And so he was always important to me. And I think I knew I was like, okay, I'm ready to stop running away from him and really just give him whatever's left over of my life. And it was not much. Like when I say I gave him my life, that might sound like, wow, that'd be really hard to do. I had nothing to offer.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
That's so, man, that's so good.
There was, so it was probably took me to get to that point, maybe where I had just run out of options. I don't know exactly, but.
And what's so crazy is just, I think that it's just human nature for us to feel like we have to I don't have a lot to offer God. So, but that's what he asked. He says, listen, you don't need to offer me anything.
Yeah.
All I want you to do is just understand your need for me in your life. And you came to that point. And so you said something just a few moments ago, I think is so important too, is you just said you knew yourself and you knew that if you didn't change your surroundings, your environment, friendships, different things like that, that it wasn't going to end well.
Yeah.
And that it'd be easy to slip back. I know that when God got a hold of my life, I was just finished my freshman year at the University of South Dakota, was involved in a fraternity and just a part of a lot of I'd say, behaviors and and entertainment choices that were not positive, and much the same way of saying, man, I want to go and live my life, and I want to go and experience freedom and all of that. But coming to the end of that, and just knowing that if I wanted to be serious, I needed to remove myself from that environment. Not that USD was a bad environment by any means, but I was involved in random things that wouldn't be healthy.
The circles you were running.
Correct. And but that was really hard because those were still my friends, right? And there was depth of relationship there.
100%.
And so for you, as you said, I need to change some things. How was that, removing yourself from different friends groups or were you able to still, because I know some people are saying, hey, I'm going to still be able to be a part of those friends, but I'm not going to allow myself to slip into maybe some of the other things that we used to do.
Yeah. And I think, I couldn't do that. And I look back and there's probably some things I wish I would have done differently, because there's friends I'd been friends with forever.
Yeah.
And we were just kind of typical kids that were, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. But I knew, like, I'd go and try to hang out, and I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Like, if I put myself in that environment, like, I was just gonna kind of end up doing the same things. So that was really hard, because you're people that are close to you, people that you care about. I think the hardest part, it felt like maybe I was sending a message like, hey, I don't want to hang out with you anymore. I don't need you anymore. And that was never it. It was just knowing myself.
Yeah.
Like, I love those guys, and they're still people that I consider good friends today. But I just knew I couldn't kind of keep doing the same things and actually see change. So I just knew I had to change. And that was really hard. And I mean, talk about, at the time I was 21, like being lonely, or like, or kind of almost like leaving your group of friends, at that age. Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing to decide, but again, I just knew something had to give.
Yeah.
And I was willing to give that up. And the Lord, even in that area, like, just from like a friend's perspective, I mean, God was just faithful, like, immediately. And so a good buddy of mine at the same time kind of had made some similar changes. And so him and I kind of, I mean, we had each other basically to kind of hang out with. And so at least, there was another guy that I knew kind of was going through similar things, or I could kind of walk through this change, or, kind of this new life that I was living with. And so, so we, just started diving into different things, whether it's church or Bible studies, different things like that. And we started a group I think we met at the river. So we were part of a small group that started the river.
Yeah.
And that's where
I forgot. I was actually thinking, like, did we first meet back in the Embrace days? But no, it was when I came to speak right after I moved back to Sioux Falls at the river, because it's run by Matt Larson.
Yep.
And I remember talking to you after up at the front of the church. Now that you say that was crazy.
Yeah. For real. Yeah. And so, but that's where, like, I mean, so again, you put yourself, you're 21, always considered myself that there was always something to do on, like, a Friday night, Saturday night, right? To kind of walking away from that to having no one to hang out with, me and one buddy basically. And so we're just pursuing this walk with the Lord, and we step out in faith, kind of start this group that meets on Friday nights for young adults. And it just kind of blossomed into this young adult ministry that, like, we just had this new group of friends and stuff to do. And so, I mean, that was a big part of it, but, like, again, God's faithfulness in that, I mean, it was pretty, hard to turn away from.
That's, and so as you look at that, Tyler, and one of the things that I definitely wanted to visit with you about today is just, how passionate you are about helping men and young men, just dudes in general, find community, and so, even just seeing the way that God provided you with community, you helped start that community.
Yeah.
But do you think that that's where that passion kind of began, was back in those days, that kind of, as you look back on that, you can see God's hand of that to where now you're like, I just want to do everything I can to try to help men get into like vital, growing, faith-filled communities?
I would say it probably stems from that to some degree. I think I've always been the type that wanted to include others. Like I just remember being a young kid and I just didn't like seeing the kid sitting off by himself, while everybody else was, whether it's at lunch or something, somebody's over here. So I always have been kind of that person that wanted to include others. And so I think it's just something that's probably part of who I am to some degree. But I think there's definitely those moments in life that kind of shape you beyond just your natural personality too. And I think that was probably one of them. And just seeing what community did for people, because I think like the river was a Friday night deal. Really what we were trying to do is like give people another option to hang out on a Friday night versus go to the bars or go to some party. It's like, because people didn't want to just sit at home and, read their Bibles or whatever. Not that would be a bad thing. That'd be awesome if you are out there. Yeah. Now it sounds awesome, right? On a Friday night, stay home, do nothing. But at the time, it was like, we thought like a Friday night thing made sense because it was still an opportunity to go out, hang out, be socialized, be around other people. And, I think when you see what that does for you in your own personal life, just getting people plugged in to a community is, I think that is really, it's what the church is all about.
Yeah.
But you can even drop it down into smaller groups, whether it's a men's group or small couples group or young adult group, whatever it is. So just getting plugged in. So I think the social aspect and community is it's really probably everything.
Yeah.
When it boils down to it.
So you've been a part of just leading. Now it's funny, you've gone from Friday night to now Friday mornings. Yeah. Leading events, is because, we're not even up late enough, right? Enough to just study, right? So let's do something in the early mornings of Friday mornings. That's what your Bible study does now. So talk with me about just the word community. You're right. It's what we're built for, right? We're built for relationship. We're created for relationship with God and with others. But sometimes men, we struggle in finding community. We sometimes struggle in saying that we need community.
Oh yeah.
What are some of the reasons that you would say that you would agree with that statement? Number one is like, why do you feel that men struggle with that? And then, as you've seen men get plugged in, how have you seen that impact their lives?
Yeah, that's really good. Well, I know men struggle with it because I struggle with opening up, just being vulnerable, transparent. And I think, it's so cool because we're going through in our men's group right now. It's called the the measure of a man. And it goes through the 20 godly characteristics of a man. And so many of those things, whether it's living a balanced life, being generous, being kind, it kind of walks through the characteristics of a godly man that's found in 1 Timothy and Titus. But when we talk through those each week, it boils down to communication. And I think at the core of who we are, men aren't great communicators with their feelings or with what's happening. So like one of the chapters in that book is called Living a Moral Life. And so it talks about like having the sex talk. And all of us in that group, it's like, how many of your dads taught you about sex? And like, everybody's like, and it's like, and it's like, would that have been weird if your dad would have talked about that? It's like, yeah, like nobody's talking about it. And that's the sex talk, which is awkward to have with your, teenage boy or whatever. But it's so many things about life
Yeah.
comes down to maybe some awkward conversations, and if you're willing to have them. And that's the cool part about our men's group is we talk about like, this is important when you're a dad, when you're a husband, when you're a male leader in someone else's life, to like get uncomfortable with some of these conversations, and not just
That's good.
about uncomfortable topics like sex, but just even opening up with and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for doing that. I'm sorry the way that I reacted, or I'm sorry that I didn't, um, talk to you the way that I should have," or whatever it is. Like that hurts a man.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. I mean, we all,
Because we admit that we did something wrong.
right? I know that's hard for us to do. And I think it comes from an area of, we're just, I don't know the right way of saying like that. We're insecure. That's the word I'm looking for. We're insecure I think in who we are as men, and who we are as dads, who we are as husbands, as leaders. Like there's just I think it's probably like some spiritual attack on, just we're not good enough, or, and so anytime I think we have those moments where we have to be vulnerable and either have a weird conversation or say we're sorry, like it kind of, highlights those insecurities to some level. That's what we see in our men's group.
Yeah.
And so what we talk a lot about in our men's group is these lies about like what a man is, right? Because like if you listen to the world of like, this is what a man is, it's somebody that's tough, that doesn't talk about their emotions, that doesn't really care about the feelings of other people. That's just, we're men, get out of my way and fall in line behind me. Like that's what the world wants us to think. That's what a man is.
Yeah, it's almost like there's like, and then so that's like one line of like what the world says, and then there's also this portrayal I think that is been new within the last 10 years. If you look at a lot like the Phil Dunphys of the Modern Families, where it's just like the dad's like kind of the brainless, doofy, fun guy that doesn't have a and so it's like these polar opposites at times.
Yeah. Yep. And so it's like, well, what does a real man look like? And I love Phil Dunphy. And but that's not, I don't think, what God intended us to be either.
Right. We need to build tree houses. We need to be that, but we also need to like understand there's a balance to all of this, right? I mean, yes, we need to lead our family. We need to be, courageous and stuff, but we also need to say, hey, look, you know what? I am reliant on other people in my life, obviously the Lord, and that we can show. I remember when we had a guy at the Men's Summit. I can't believe his name is escaped me right now, but in his book "Cry Like a Man," and we had so many. I don't know if you're able to be at that one, but he was able to really unpack this whole idea of like so many of us were taught that men don't cry, and how that it's you just need to be tough, you need to bury your emotions, but yet God wires us with these emotions, and he just says, okay, now let me help you understand them, and then live out of just understanding that they're not a bad thing, but how can you bring those under my authority, and how can they be of benefit to others?
And that's where it gets confusing, I think, right? Because we feel anger at times, but it's like, how do we feel that and not act on it? Right. Because I think that's, and now that's getting into a whole nother topic of, if you feel it, act on it, be it, that's who you are. And I don't agree with that. And I don't think that would be biblical to say that if you have a feeling, act on it in the moment and, just become that person. And so, I think it is. So you said the word courage, like be courageous. And like, so what does that look like to have courage as a dad, or courage as a husband, or even a son, or any of those things? And I think that as the older I get, the more I just see it in our men's group, like the word surrender just keeps coming up. And this idea of even going back to when I gave up this life, whatever it was at 21, this friend group, this just kind of thing that I knew, the only thing that I knew, and I give it up for something that I didn't really, I knew what I was going for, but I didn't really know exactly what that looked like. Like that's surrender. And I think that takes courage to some degree. And sometimes when you have nothing left to lose, you're like, oh,
Yeah, well,
this is easy.
Yeah. But it's in the day to day.
It's in the day to day.
I was surrendering this, and that was the whole theme of last year's Men Summit. That it turned out to be how the Lord really worked, and the whole theme last year was being of men of courage.
Yeah,
and over, it just came on commit. The most courageous thing we can do is surrender control. Surrender just our own aspirations and just positions, power. I mean, whatever we think we have to have or that we have had, and then we realize, man, we really have never had any of that anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
Right. If we are in control, it's not going to end well.
Right. Yeah. And so I want to go to that with you here, and because you actually had an experience this past summer where you realized in a new way how very little control you had.
Yeah.
When you had a bit of what I guess you could probably call it a health scare.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we can call it that.
Absolutely.
So tell me about that, and just let's just start there, and then tell me about the situation that happened, and then kind of, the journey since then.
Yep. Yeah. So back on May 13th, it was a Monday morning. I woke up 1:00 in the morning to just the worst chest pain I'd ever felt. And it was something where, it woke me up, stood up out of bed to the point where I'm like, man, I don't know what this is, but so I'm sitting there, I'm trying to move it around, whether it's heartburn, I'm trying to gauge how to like control this. And just couldn't touch it. I walked downstairs, got a drink of water. By the time I get down there, I'm just literally pouring sweat. Then I'm like, so you start hearing these things because your first thought is like, okay, I have chest pains. First thought's like, I'm having a heart attack. But then I'm like, then you hear all those false alarms, right? It's like, oh, it was just heartburn, or it was a panic attack. So then I'm like, maybe I'm having a panic attack. So I just try to control my breathing, and just nothing was working, right? So I went upstairs, woke my wife up, and I just said, hey, I don't know what's going on. I think I need to go into the hospital. She looked at me, and my wife's a sleeper, one of those that doesn't like to get woke up, like most of us. But she took one look at me, and she's like, okay, I'll get ready. So I don't know what I look like, but she could tell I probably had like panic on my face.
Yeah.
So we drove to Avera and got there, and they got me admitted right away. Instantly start hooking you up with, on different whatever they are, stickers on your chest, ripping your shirt off. They're shoving pills in your mouth, doing everything. When you say you have chest pain, you go into the ER, they act pretty quickly. So instantly when I got in there, I was fine. I was like, it just calmed down, and like me and my wife were laughing, and she's like, oh, you totally had, a panic attack or something.
Yeah.
Well, they kept running tests, and like one test in particular just kept coming back that they didn't like, and my numbers kept going up. And so they sent me over to the heart hospital to run a scope of my heart. And they said I had some episode, needed to scope my heart. So I spent about a day in the heart hospital, more tests. Literally the whole time I'm feeling fine, normal, ready to go home, get back to like, I got other stuff I need to be doing. And we walked out of the heart hospital the next day, and on the papers as we're leaving, it said heart attack with no blockage. So they didn't find any blockages. They didn't find any arteries clogged. There was no rhyme or reason. They actually kept telling me how good my heart looked, how good my arteries looked. But it said that I had a heart attack. And so pretty sobering, like walking out of there even, and just obviously being there during the whole episode. It was definitely a traumatic experience for about 20, 30 minutes. And then after that, it felt like kind of like not that big of a deal, which sounds weird to say.
Yeah.
So walking out of there, seeing on the discharge papers that I had a heart attack at 42 years old, pretty sobering, just to see that. And so, but it's funny, like how hard-headed we can be sometimes, because even that, I mean, so I had a heart attack, spent time in the heart hospital, but it wasn't until like a week later, I'm walking in my neighborhood, and some neighbors were walking by, and one of them's a doctor, and they stopped. Oh my gosh, we heard everything. And I'm like, I feel great though. And she's a doctor, right? So I said, yeah, so whatever kind of heart attack I had, like I couldn't have died from that though. And she looked at me like, are you an idiot? She literally looked at me like, she's like, you could have died. I'm like, really? I didn't feel like it was one of those heart attacks that could have killed me. And she's like,
have you felt one of those before?
Yeah, I don't know what that one feels like, but she just looked at me and she's like, well, think of it this way. Your house was on fire. And if you didn't put it out, like it would have burned down. So it doesn't matter if it started from an electrical issue or a gas fire or how it started, like your house was on fire. And I just remember the rest of my walk on the way home, I'm like, that's when it finally hit me. Like, man, that was really, I mean, it was a big deal. I knew that, but it was at that moment where it really kind of kicked in. Yeah.
So going from, that period of time, I mean, obviously we're now roughly, 7, 8 months away from that. And we've talked before just about like, I mean, that has really caused you to kind of evaluate some things, caused you to kind of think about like, what adjustments maybe do I need to make? Where do maybe my, priorities need to be adjusted or whatever. So what was some of the kind of the, like what's flowed out of that?
Yeah. Well, I think so in the hospital, we had the Got a CEO event like a month before that. And it was Tony Dungy and Brian Slipka. Right. And so, and during that event, I remember Brian mentioning that when his dad was dying, that his dad like pulled him in and was like, what are you doing? And I remember that standing out a month before that, but it just came forefront. Especially while I was even sitting in the heart hospital, just kind of hanging out, waiting for different tests. A good friend of mine, Adam Weber, came to visit me, and we had this kind of conversation, like, if it's going to end tomorrow, or potentially could end tomorrow. And when you have one of those moments, you start really, thinking like, oh, okay, it could just literally happen at any time. It's like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life, with my strengths that I've been given, or just the influence that I have? I think where it really hit home to begin with, and really probably the strongest to this day, is just like who am I showing up as a dad? And you think, I mean, I take so much for granted. And where you just, especially when you have young kids, like we were mentioning at the beginning, you're busy, you're running from one practice to the next. I mean, you're just drowning in kids' activities, right? We bring it on ourselves. I don't know why. But really, it's like, how am I showing up? How am I treating every interaction with my kid? Because I think it's so easy to take those for granted, that those kids are just going to be there forever, and that this life is just going to go on forever. And that was just that eye opener. That's like, no, we're not guaranteed this.
Yeah.
We're not even
It's
guaranteed
good.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it really just like changed that perspective of how am I interacting with my kids and my wife, just in my house, first and foremost. Because I think that's easy, like I said, just to kind of go through the motions and maybe not really be as intentional with how you want to lead and how the impact you want to have on your family. You kind of, it's weird how we do that, but you almost like, I don't want to say throw those relationships to the side, but they don't get the attention that they should most of
Oh,
the
it's so
time.
easy to put in get cruise control or just on coast. You just kind of coast through it, and you can tend to take it for granted. And you know, even just the way we bring energy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they definitely get leftovers at the end of the day versus, you know, maybe the main course that they really deserve, you know, and they don't get our best. And so how does it play out, Tyler? I mean, because it's easy to say, okay, so now I'm having more, you know, focus on that, but like, what does that mean, like brass tacks? Because I think that like that thought I think resonates with a lot of us. Okay. And I will tell you, like my boys now are 20 and 23. And those times with my boys in my home are done.
Yeah.
They come home now for a visit.
Yeah.
They're not there day in and day out. And so I hear that, and you know, and I learned that you know, much later than I wish I would have as well, even as I was trying to grow RESGEN and stuff, and I was gone a lot. And again, I don't know that you can always do it all.
No.
I mean, because you know, that the reality is that we all need to do a good job at our jobs, and we need to, you know, do everything we can do there too. But so it is a both and. But what does it mean for you to be like, okay, how am I making sure that I'm bringing my best, you know, to my kids and to Mel and.
Yep. I think, okay, so, and I love what you just said because about your boys and like, you can't go back and reverse that. And that's hard. And we mentioned my daughter's driving now and literally I never see her. It's amazing.
Well,
They
once
get
they
a car and I came down, it was Saturday morning. It was like 6:30. She's leaving in the morning. I come down, I'm like, where are you going? Go to the gym. Like, it's 6:30. Yeah.
On a Saturday.
I'm ready. Yeah. So it's like she just needed zero excuse to get out of the house. Right. But I think what it is, whether it's your kids or like a health scare or what that shows you is like nothing lasts forever. Like your kids that are bringing you so much, just, you know, overwhelming stress when they're 2, 3, 4 years old and you're chasing babies around, right? Like you just think they're going to be that age forever. So it's so hard in the moment to enjoy it. Even when people say enjoy it, it goes quick. But how do you like really enjoy the moment? And now you can't go back and you can't bring the boys back home. But now they're this age and there's a really cool relationship or an opportunity for you to have with them today. And just what does that look like? And I think, you know, there was in our men's group, we went through the book of Colossians earlier this year. And again, I think after my heart episode stuff, just that the Lord had kind of pointed out to me earlier in the year, kind of came back and just kind of, you know, full circle. And one of the chapters of Colossians in chapter 3, it talks about think on heavenly things, not just on earthly things. And I've spent some time kind of diving into that because that sounds like, I don't even know what that means, right? Think on heavenly things, not on earthly things. And I don't know if I could, when I first just hear that and I think of like an image, I think of like somebody's like playing a harp or laying back on like some clouds or something. I don't know what that even means. What does heavenly things mean? When you dive into that chapter, it talks about just being present and knowing who you are as a new creation. So as a new believer, like I think it starts with us first, right? When any interactions with our kid, like we got to get us right and like knowing who you are. The only way I've ever understood more of who I am in Christ is just spending time with him, spending time in his word, in prayer, journaling, just making space for him. And so that's something I've been really good at in the past, that probably as I've gotten busier and busier, it's just gotten away from me. And so this summer I kind of found that again, where it's like, I need my morning times. We talked about the gym. I get up early to go to the gym typically, and I used to be 5 days a week. I'd be at the gym early. So I'm down to 2 days a week now. And now my other Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I get up, spend time in the word, journaling, just sitting with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. So that, I think for me, it just started with like getting back to understanding who I am.
Yeah.
In Colossians 3, if you go down further in chapter 3, it talks about giving an allowance for others and their offenses towards you. So like, give them grace, give other people grace. Like that's another thing, and you think on heavenly things. And I think, again, with my kids, where it's not so much that, I don't love them or I don't want to spend time with them, but I'm all over them most days on like things that they're doing wrong. Right. And it's allowed me to step back, and I'm still not perfect. If Mel was sitting here, she'd be like, hold on, don't act like you've got this all figured out. 'Cause I don't, but I think it's just that being able to forgive, especially our kids and our spouse on like the little, just day-to-day annoyances is huge.
Yeah. So it's
for those moments.
It is. And, you make me remember, I'm sure I've shared this in a different episode or whatever, and I've shared it in messages, but when Isaiah was probably 14, 15 years old, and I still would go up and say goodnight to him in his room, even though that was really tucking. You don't tuck in a teenager, but, like go in and say goodnight, pray with them, love them, whatever. But it was during a season where we were just kind of at each other a little bit more. And I said, dude, what's going on with us, whatever. And he said, well, Dad, I just don't feel like I do anything right. And I said, well, I mean, I'm proud of you, right? And he said, yeah, I just wish you would tell me more and showed me the things I'm doing right instead of always pointing out the things I'm doing wrong. And I just very vividly remember at that moment that I needed to do a better job of catching my kids do stuff well.
Oh, yeah.
And then not just take it for granted, but say, hey, you did that really well. Hey, thanks for the way you treated your brother. Hey, thanks for, emptying the dishwasher, or, I mean, whatever, not even just about what they do, but just even in who they are. Right. And just, hey, but the way that you're just, making us laugh in the house, or, I mean, whatever, right. Just anything, because we all need that encouragement and that affirmation. And when all we ever hear is the stuff we do wrong, then why would they even want to spend time with us? Right. I mean, if all you ever did every time I see you would be like, geez, Tom, I got to tell you something. The way that you fumbled on the last pod, or like, I just saw you do this. You're a disaster. Get it together. I'd be like, I'm not going to hang out with Tyler anymore, But we all need that. But yet somehow it doesn't like compute into our brains that, man, that's how we, and even more so, we should do that with our kids.
Right.
And our spouse.
I know it.
So.
And even as a believer, I mean, you would think like that's just a natural instinct.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It goes back to, for me, insecurity. And like, if I'm the leader of my house, if I'm the person that when people see my kids out and about, that it's going to reflect on me, like the insecurities in me, I want to fine tune that at every single moment and leave no space for any error, because God forbid I look like a bad parent, right? Or people see my imperfections. And so I think, again, sitting with the Lord, super important, because it allows those insecurities to be filled with like truth of who we are, and then carries over into those relationships of grace.
Yeah. Oh, like, that's so good.
They're my boys. They're 9 and 7. And they get out of the basketball court, and my instinct if they're not shooting threes like Curry, not like I ever did either, but if they don't, day one, I'm like, what are we doing? What are you doing? Why are you shooting like that? And again, my wife would say I definitely have a lot to figure out on a lot of aspects, but I think what I've gotten better at is over the last few months is just allowing them to be 7 and to
that's so good.
learn and grow at a pace that a 7-year-old should be, right? Not some insecure 43-year-old trying to like inflect what I should have done on them. So
I love it. And I'll never forget when Chase said to me one day, we were having some sort of conversation. He's like, Dad, you just want me to be perfect because of how it how it's a reflection of you or whatever. Right. So we have to be perfect. So everybody thinks you're perfect or whatever. And like, don't you just, I mean, there's times when your kids say something, you're like, man, that's so right. But I just really don't want you to know that you're right.
Yeah. So I'm just going to keep yelling at you in the moment.
That's it. You're grounded.
Yeah. Don't talk to your dad like that.
Oh my gosh. No, that's so good, brother. That's so good. Let me ask you this, like, because has that episode, I mean, that's the word you used, and the health scare, whatever, has that impacted or strengthened any other area of your life? And the reason why I ask is because, ever since I have known you, you've never been really shy about talking about your faith, but I think that's even gotten more and more prominent, where, I mean,
I'd say so.
You enter faith conversations. You're very faith forward in living out your faith in the corporate space. And then even in just the generosity in which you live.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, your time and your talents, your giftedness, but even just in the way that you want to give of, the financial blessing that God has given you or your company. And so you love being able to give to the community, ministries, obviously your church, all of that. So has that even strengthened some of those things, or what do you attribute maybe just your growth in sharing your faith and your growth in generosity over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that God's been working on me for a lot of years, to be quite honest. I was one, especially early in my career, compartmentalized. This is my professional life. This is my spiritual life. This is my personal life, whatever, and not that they were two totally separate things necessarily, but where I knew people when they were coming to me for real estate advice weren't coming to me to be, for spiritual guidance or something like that. My position has evolved over the years from, where I was a solo agent all on my own, working directly with clients, to now still doing that some, but more so leading and just, trying to lead and manage my team. And so it's more so from like an impact that way. And that's really where like my faith kind of started blending into my business, because at the end of the day, it's like, it's just who we are, hopefully, as believers.
Yeah.
And so the more, I think what leadership does more than anything is it flushes out like who you are at the core. And so if there's something in there bad, it's going to probably come out. If there's something good in there, hopefully that comes out as well. So it's been something I feel like the Lord's been working on me. But again, this year, I mean, it's just been a crazy year, from the heart episode to there's just been a lot going on professionally. We've had a lot of turnover on our team. From the end of last year, the market was so good for so long. And then last year it just kind of just shifted quickly. And so it just kind of revolved into kind of showing people, really kind of asking people if this is what they wanted to do. So we've seen a lot of change there. We've, personally, we lost our dog this year, which is there's a lot
just
of
like one
people.
more thing.
It's just one more thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a dog's an important
part of our family, right? So there's just things, and I think it all kind of just, again, it gets you back to your question, like, is this making me more bold in my faith? I think it's just showing me all this stuff that I worry about, whether it's what other people think or whether, my business is going to go bankrupt or whatever the fears out there that prevent you from being generous or being bold. I think they're just like, they've toned down a little bit for me to the point of like, who really cares? If this can all just end tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? If this can all end tomorrow, then why are we worried about these things that are so far down the road or probably will never happen? And I found myself, even the last 5 years, those kind of crazy made up scenarios in my head of things that could happen that wouldn't be good were dictating on some level what I'm doing today. And I think after this year, I'm just kind of like, you know what? We're just going to do things from a business standpoint the way that I feel led to do it or the way that I want to do it. And not from a selfish perspective, but it's who I am.
Yeah.
I can't run somebody else's business. This is my team. And so we're just going to do it the way that I want to do it. And that comes out, in the generosity standpoint. I really do care for this community, and there's so many groups that are just doing amazing things. And so it almost to some level just feels like it's, I don't know if an obligation as a business owner in this city, but something that I feel like this city, this community has done a lot for my family, for my team, for my business. And so it's just a way to give back and hopefully make this community better through other people that are doing awesome things.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So let's just say someone is out there listening and saying, man, I'm really struggling having the perspective that Tyler has. Is just like, okay, you know what?
Yeah.
I struggle with wearing my faith on my sleeve, or I struggle even just with the aspect of generosity. We all have different areas of our life that we struggle in. What would be an encouragement that you would give them? Like someone that says, boy, I just don't know if I can talk about my faith. Like, I just don't know, like, what encouragement would you give them?
That's okay. Honestly, part of me is like, that's fine. You don't have to do things and I'm not the most bold guy with my faith by any means, but God, like, we're all on a journey, right? And it's our own unique, special, it's our journey.
Yeah.
And no one else has had the same experiences you have had in your life. And nobody has had the exact same experiences I have. So we're all on different, levels of our journey. I would just encourage that person to like get at the root of why. Like, and again, kind of going back to those insecurities, like, what is it? Like, why is it that you can't fully, if that's the faith you want to live out and you can't, like, why is that? Like, what are you afraid of deep down? Is it afraid of, what others might think around you, or afraid of, if I do say this, it's going to hurt my standing in the community, or it's going to hurt my business? And so those are the hard conversations to have with God of like, why do I feel this fear or insecurity? And it's another layer of, I think, surrender.
Well, and I think that's so good, Tyler. And I think that something that is, I think, crucial in that process, and that's really helped me. Like when I find that I'm struggling with certain areas, like generosity is not something that came natural to me because that wasn't necessarily my childhood, right? I didn't experience it. So I had to learn generosity. I had to learn tithing. I had to learn all those types of things, right? But when you know that you're not journeying alone with those things. So I think going back to our conversation about a men's group and connection and building community, to be able to go to another person and say, hey, I really want to share my faith a little bit more, or I really want to be more generous, or I really want to make better decisions, or I really want to, think of myself more highly because I just don't feel like I measure up, or whatever the kinds of things that these internal dialogues we have with ourselves all the time, right? But when you can bring someone else into that conversation, some other trusted individual, especially like another dude that you're walking with, just says, "Hey, can you help me maybe process some of this?
Yeah.
Like, have you ever experienced this?" And so you're not alone. But I feel like that's one of those things that could be a real help. I mean, those have been real help to me. I know for you as well. So that said, I want to kind of end our time with just talking about a topic that we already talked about a little bit in that community piece. How does a guy go about finding true community and a friend? Because like when we're little, I'm sure your kids have come home and say, "Hey, I made 8 new friends today," right? I mean, that's just not normal vernacular for dudes. But like, I know there's an epidemic of loneliness, in men. And so, what encouragement, I guess, would you give a guy that's like saying, how can they find? I mean, if they live in Sioux Falls and come to your stuff on Friday morning, for sure, but like just in general, what's a guy to do to try to build those kind of relationships where you can have those maybe discussions that are a little bit more uncomfortable?
Yeah. And I think it's just, if you're looking for it, you'll find it, whether it's our men's group on Friday morning, whether it's the RESGEN Summit, or whether it's just church or somebody at your work or wherever it is. But it's one of those things that I think, again, getting to that moment of being vulnerable. Like, are you willing to be vulnerable with somebody else? Because I think that's the depth of the relationship, is going to go as deep as you allow it to go.
Yeah.
Right. And we like to live on that surface level, and everything. Yeah, we're good. Everything's good. Let's watch the game. And all that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, we need that, just hanging out with dudes time too. But getting to like your spiritual walk and your growth, like, I don't think that comes natural to anybody.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think giving time or money or resources is a natural thing.
Yeah.
It comes from a biblical truth that then we try to live out. And that can be really confusing when it goes against the grain of really what society tells you to get successful. You got to hang on to everything. You got to make super smart investments. You need to save this much of your money and only spend this much. And all those things are good, but then the Bible kind of flips it upside down. And it's like, whatever you have, give it.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, it's not yours anyway.
Can somebody
it's all
help
the
me
Lord's.
Understand this? Cause,
Yeah.
And so I think that community, it's out there. Wherever you're at, you can find it. It's a matter of, do you know that's what you are looking for, and are you looking for it?
Yeah. And I think that's that's a great word of just saying, you got to be willing to put yourself out there. You got to be willing to just say, "Hey, I am going to be intentional, and I'm going to find those opportunities." So let's just say a guy is here in Sioux Falls and is looking for something like that. Friday mornings, you lead a group.
Yep.
Time and location for that?
Yep. So we're at Embrace Church. We're at the 57th Street campus from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Yeah. And there's room for more guys?
There are. There are. We're growing, but there's plenty of room. It's been a really fun season for that, just to see. And again, I think it gets back to there's people out there that are just like, you know what? Like, I want an authentic faith. And we're seeing that in our men's group, where guys are coming that are like, all right, I've been, claiming to be a Christian for a long time, but they're just coming to this, whether it's realization or just this point in their life where they're like, am I though? Like, am I actually living out those principles, or am I just hiding behind, a label of some sort? And so, we'd love to. We're always have room for somebody. So that's a great spot. I know there's a lot of John Nagel through Central Church has a lot of better man groups that are going on right now that are great. There's a lot of good men's groups out there. And
Yeah, I
It's
would
just
I would
asking
agree.
around.
Yeah, Sioux Falls. I mean, there's a lot of great groups that are meeting, and then sometimes and maybe that's still intimidating for a person to be able to go up and, I mean, so that maybe it just starts with, hey, can we go have lunch someday? I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes
Oh, for sure.
it's just that initial first step of
Yeah.
saying and getting to know and getting comfortable and building those relationships and friendships, and that can get you on that road. So, well, brother, this has been so good. I'm so grateful for number one, your friendship, our time together here at this table. We end our podcasts with something we call the final word. And I think it goes back to your dream. This is the final time you're going to hear this. Push your chair in. then they're gonna push your chair in. But so we just ended with the final word, just kind of 30 to 60 seconds of whatever the Lord lays on your heart. Maybe it's a scripture that he delivered to you while you were laying in that hospital bed. Maybe it's just a final word of encouragement that you want to share with listeners today. But do you got a little final word for us here?
Yeah, I mean, I would just go back to that idea of wherever you're at, you're right where you're supposed to be. So even when I'm laying in my bed, waking up to that pastor saying, this is the last time, I was right where I was supposed to be, even though I wasn't in a good place, right? And so it's never too late to just start making changes. It's never too late to ask the Lord to show you what it looks like to be a follower of him. And so I think for anybody out there that's maybe like, yeah, I'm too old to do something new, or I'm too young to do something, crazy, whatever it is. I mean, you're right where you're supposed to be, but there's an opportunity for you as well. And so it's just that idea of you're not lost. God's always there waiting for you. And I just think of like think on heavenly things, not just of earthly things. And that idea of that, there's so much more to this than just the earthly things that can overwhelm us at times.
Man, that's good. That's a realtor dropping some truth, dropping real talk. So, Tyler, thank you. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Making time for just sharing your story. I know that it encouraged me and encouraged listeners. So really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for everything that you do.
Oh,
you're the man.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tyler today. If you'd like to connect with him more, you can find him on all the usual social media channels and at tylergoffgroup.com. All right, that's all for today. Be sure to head to resgen.org to get yourself registered for our RESGEN Men's Summit and Date Night Comedy events. And then I'll look forward to seeing you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others. We'll see ya.